Welcome to the PDX files. Each week we dive into the weird and the unexplained here in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. My name is Peej.
And I'm Mac.
Mac, what are we talking about today?
Well, as folks will notice, the title of this video is the OG of UFO sightings, and Kenneth Arnold is indeed that. He was not on purpose, but he basically coined the term flying saucers. And and happening here again in the Northwest is kind of where it all started, as it always does. So with that, let's get into the gangster shit.
Right on.
The story begins on June 24th, 1947, in Washington State near Mount Rainier, just 2 weeks before the famed UFO crash in Roswell. On this bright day with clear visibility, longtime pilot Kenneth Arnold is flying his privately owned utility aircraft.
Kenneth Arnold was an experienced pilot. There had been a missing aircraft that the military had put a reward out for, and he thought, oh, I'll go out and I'll take a look.
It's at this critical point in time that the modern age of the UFO phenomenon is about to begin. So too, the era of conspiracy by the US military to suppress what the public knows about extraterrestrial spacecraft. Arnold is cruising at an altitude of 9,200 feet just before 3 o'clock in the afternoon when he sees a bright flashing light about 15 miles away.
And this was a day where there was good, clear visibility. And what Kenneth Arnold saw was 9 strange objects.
9?
Moving at high speed, flying apparently in formation.
Yeah.
He had the presence of mind to attempt to measure and calculate their distance and speed. He knew the distance between 2 particular peaks in the mountain range where he was, and he was able to time it.
I mean, just that right there, I think kind of leads to a little bit of credibility for the guy. I mean, the fact that he was able to do that so quickly,
Right.
whether or not he was wearing a fedora, I don't know, but which kind of downgrades his credibility. But that was the fashion back then. But this was a couple months before the Roswell incident. This was something that, and again, it kind of his credibility has never been attacked, really.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's ever said, oh, this guy's in that case, or he doesn't know what he's talking about. And as you'll see in a bit further in the video, he's extremely very, very detailed in his description beyond the flying saucer stuff. It's obviously not a saucer that he saw, but anyway, you'll understand the hair about that in just a second.
Okay, here we go.
At first, he thought maybe the speed was 1,200 miles per hour.
This is interesting.
But then later, it was calculated to be nearly 1,657 miles per hour. This was 3 times faster than any plane could fly in that time frame.
The Kenneth Arnold encounter is not only iconic, but it's also really revealing, because this is the first time in the post-war era that we really have something that we could probably say is of possibly extraterrestrial origin. We're looking at a technology that appears to be far more advanced than anything we had at that time.
The next day, Arnold talks to the press, and the incident gains explosive nationwide news coverage. It's the first ever credible sighting of UFOs over the United States. And thanks to Arnold's description, the term flying saucer is born.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a lot of people don't really know where that came from. They kind of just assume it came from Hollywood, but it didn't. It came from this guy who saw it. And as he describes it, it's like if you've ever gone to a lake or a slow moving river where you can throw a really flat stone
Right.
across and it skips, that's what he was really kind of referring to.
Right.
Kind of the parlance of the times, as it were. But and again, this is one that's never been debunked, has never been really disputed. Other than that, I think the thing I remember the skeptics saying, "Oh, it was a school of geese." Like,
What?
come on, exactly. It's like swamp gas. Are you effing kidding me right now? So the fact that he saw this and he went to the press seems to me like he was probably getting a lot of pushback from the people who was telling it to, the government wise.
So obviously I have not seen this video as usual, and it maybe it'll be
It's for the better.
revealed a little bit further into the video. But so remind me again, why is he super credible? I mean, just because who is he?
I mean, he was well known within the community. He was well known in the work that he was doing. His presentation to everybody else around him was like extremely. Was like this guy's solid. He was pretty well known as far he was a pilot in 1947. It's not
Right.
like we
Okay.
got somebody who's got like 50 years of experience flying a plane. This guy was like doing it from like the very beginning. So yeah, and he's out there looking for a damn military aircraft. He ain't out there. There was no UFO, there was no flying saucers, there was none of that kind of stuff known to the public at that time. So there's no reason to fake it other than I guess you can point to their radio broadcast, the world, the world of
What?
worlds and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that wasn't really there was never talk of flying saucers, never talk of it of anything like that. So I think this isn't the kind of guy that was predisposed to like bullshit, I guess you could say.
Well, and the fact that he obviously described what he saw, and coined the term flying saucer. That's pretty cool. And it looks like he was
He's
just
the OG.
doing a quick wiki search on him, and it looks like he's he's an aviator and a businessman. So maybe that, he did have a good reputation already during that time, and so that's why people were, he got credibility from the get go on that one.
Yeah, and it was back in the time. They're like, yeah, see, yeah. So
Yeah.
obviously, he's definitely credible.
Okay. All right.
Sorry,
Let's keep going.
sorry about that, everyone.
Let's keep going here.
When Kenneth Arnold related the experience, he was asked by one of the reporters, how did these objects move? And he used the analogy, he said, like a saucer would if you skipped it across water. Now, the media got hold of that, and they used the term flying saucer. And in some quarters, that led to a misperception that Arnold had seen a saucer-shaped object, when in fact it was more delta-shaped.
People
Yep.
really forget what a
You
great
look at his
witness
drawing here
Kenneth
in a minute,
Arnold
it's really
actually
interesting.
was. He was a private pilot in his 30s, and to everybody who knew him, he was a solid guy.
Arnold's claim gains even more traction when two eyewitnesses to the same sighting come forward.
The sighting was corroborated by a prospector on Mount Adams who saw these things. He claimed to see 6 of these objects on the same day at the same time.
And then there was a forestry service worker on fire watch who saw flashes in the sky at almost exactly the same time that Arnold had had his sighting. He also said
Yeah,
the
it was
objects
corroborated, I forgot
appeared
about
to
that.
move in a straight line.
After a few weeks, Arnold submits
See,
a
that's-
letter to Air Force intelligence regarding his sighting.
Kenneth Arnold made a detailed report, and he included description and some very detailed sketches of the craft that he'd seen. Well, the military did an investigation, and they simply dismissed the whole thing and said it was a mirage. Well, that seems crazy
As
to
usual.
me. It just doesn't fit the facts.
Yeah, I mean, he said it right there. It doesn't fit the facts. And if you look at his drawing and his description of what actually happened, it's like the guy saw it, and there were 2 other sources, and I totally forgot about that. Who witnessed it as well. So when you have that type of backup, and there's plenty of stories within the UFO UAP lore that we can get into that are even more credible than this, that are backed up by even like radar and more modern technology. But if you look at that, it's really difficult for me to believe that he saw geese, and that was the thing that I remember reading about was or imagining, like they said, he imagined that shit.
Right.
Come on, I mean that's just so fucking lame.
Plus, he's got 2 other people who saw the same thing at,
Right.
from 2 different other vantage points. who would obviously, if they were geese, they would have been able to see that fairly immediately too, right?
I saw geese today. They were flying south. They weren't moving like 1,800 miles an hour. Now I get it. He's in a plane, right? So he's seeing it below, but and so it kind of depends on the the vantage point.
Right.
But the fact that they shined and they geese don't do
Ex
that.
exactly.
Right? You're not gonna get that kind of reaction from geese, and even if you are going fast and you're not going that fast in a plane like this back in those days, like, he's maybe going a couple 100 miles an hour in an old meter like that, it's not gonna seem that fast, and so, to me, it's very difficult to debunk the sighting.
Right. All right. We'll continue here.
Let's do this.
Does it seem like the Air Force made a fair assessment? Or is it possible the
No.
military attempted to suppress Arnold's story to prevent further
Maybe.
dissemination of the facts?
I don't think
Fortunately
they
for
knew
the
at this
public,
point.
further support for Arnold's UFO sighting appears just 2 weeks later, in early July 1947,
Roswell.
over Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, Phoenix. Oh, shit. I
William
forgot about that, too.
Rhodes heard a strange noise, and he came out of his house with his camera, expecting to get a photo of a jet. And to his amazement, he saw this strange craft in the sky. He managed to get 2 photographs, and subsequently, the media
look at that.
published these with a story saying, here is
the
photographic
shape.
evidence of these so-called flying saucers.
Rhodes offers his photographs to the Arizona Republic, who publishes them on July 9th, 1947.
Subsequently, Kenneth Arnold saw that story and those photos, and he said, that's exactly what I saw.
A side-by-side comparison between Kenneth Arnold's sketches and William Rhodes' photos illustrates the uncanny similarities between the
Pretty
objects
goddamn
sighted.
close.
But then, within 48 hours of Rhodes' photos being published, 2 men show up to interview Rhodes. Lieutenant Colonel Beam
The
and
feds.
FBI agent Letting.
I mean, they have the
Afterwards,
names.
Rhodes claims the men confiscated his film negatives. And when he calls
It's
the
not just the Men in
FBI,
Black,
they
they got
deny
names.
all knowledge of the incident. Was this to destroy the evidence of UFOs? And is there a connection to sensational news of a UFO crash just 400 miles away at Roswell, New Mexico?
That's what I was remembering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. So that I mean, I don't know. You could take with it from what you will from that last story, but the fact that those photos, the ones that survived, they probably had other photos that were probably a lot better than that that were taken. That is very compelling because it you can't fake that kind of stuff back. I mean, this guy's not some graphic designer working on an iMac or no, sorry, not an iMac, but like an Apple computer with a photo like freaking Photoshop, and it matches. And this guy didn't even really know quite what I mean, he wouldn't have had access to the drawings that kind of Arnold gave to the Air Force.
Right. I was going to say, because he gave that to the government. It wasn't anything
Yes,
that.
yeah, the government's not going to release that shit, right?
Right. Exactly.
So to me, that's even more credibility to Kenneth Arnold's original sighting. And again, it could be something else. Could they have been in cahoots? I mean, maybe, but I don't think so. Back in those days, it's just communication and stuff just didn't work like that back in those days.
Not that quick.
There was no internet. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, he's in he's in Arizona. They don't know what the fuck's going on in Oregon. Even if they see it on the front page, they're like, okay, whatever. It's not
In
like they can
Washington,
go-
not Oregon.
Sorry, you're right. Around Mount Adams, which is very, very close to, Mount Rainier, where it sort of was, but it was spotted at out around Mount Adams as well.
Right.
So it's very, very close. Anyway, it's the Pacific Northwest versus going to Arizona. Again, in 1997, maybe 1947. No, hell no. There's no collusion there.
Well, there's government involvement for sure.
I would agree.
In the cessation of the sensation, if that makes sense. All right. We'll continue here. You have me skipping a few seconds in, so I'm just going to start it where you wanted me to.
That's what you should always do.
Here we go.
is that William Rhodes captured on film the same, now famous UFO that crashed in Roswell. And his experience with the government marks the beginning of an official conspiracy to cover up any evidence of UFOs. And despite the government's effort, the existence of off-world visitors becomes indisputable.
1952 was a year of UFO sightings that had been unparalleled ever. In the United States, UFO sightings were so many and of such high quality, both by the general public and within the military, that it became a serious problem. And it was a problem that got the attention of all of the higher military agencies and the CIA. And by the later part of 1952, the question really was, how do we deal with this to contain this from a public relations point of view? Because it's a really difficult situation for government agencies and the military to have to deal with a public that is convinced that these flying saucers are real. And indeed, it was becoming more and more that way, because the fact was there were a lot of high quality, very difficult to explain UFO sightings from that year, and they were getting a lot of publicity.
You know what's kind of interesting about this? It kind of reminds me of a little bit of ufology and the kind of the history of, kind of what happened back in the the 60s when the government finally decided to cut off funding for Project Blue Book. And J. Allen Hynek and his turn from complete skeptic who was put in charge of the program to and he came up with the phrase of swamp gas. That's where it came from in Project Blue Book back in the 1960s.
Right.
And kind of this apathy that kind of persisted in this, not debunking necessarily, but like the humiliation of people who would try to come forward with stuff like, oh, you're crazy. That's just ridiculous. That's not real. It kind of came back. A lot of people think that Roswell has been this thing that it's been legend for the last. It hasn't. It got forgotten by history. It got brought up again finally in like the 1980s,
Right.
and kind of after even Steven Spielberg's
E.T.
No, the Close
Encounters of the Third Kind, okay.
Which is a J. Allen Hynek. That's part of his scale, his rating scale of how human beings are able to interact with this. So
Right.
it wasn't like Roswell has always been this legendary thing. There's been so many sightings since 1947 when this term was coined, right? And there's so many different types of UFO, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, different shapes, different sizes, different interactions that, I don't think this was the first, but I think it because it's so catchy, right? It's like a pop song a little bit. It just sort of stays within the memory of the nomenclature and all those kind of things. It's
Right.
like that really kicked off the modern version of UFO lore and history. And I think it because and we've talked a little bit about this with the Foo Fighters and things of that nature, and the Battle of LA and things that we maybe haven't seen yet, but you're going to see it. That it's something that has been building and building, and that kind of was like the release into the wild for everybody, right? And to me, looking at it as someone who loves history and who believes that we're not alone, it's a really exciting topic, and we should give cred to the OG
For sure.
right?
Yeah, we've got one more final portion of the clip here, and then I do have some commentary regarding the feds.
Nice.
So hang on.
Nice. Here we go.
Essentially to say that this is a problem that needs to be debunked in the public realm.
We have received and analyzed between 1 and 2,000 reports. There have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations.
Yeah, I wanted to get that last bit in there. Can you believe that for a second? That motherfucker is full of shit.
Again, I think I don't know. So two things. One, the suppressing of information has always been, part of what governments do, right?
Yep.
For the alleged reason of not causing public panic, right? Or a public uproar, because those things also lead to other problems that, that could exacerbate the issue. And
Sure.
so I kind of agree with that. But I think, like you were saying earlier, the government or the feds who are trying to suppress the information are making the witness or the people who have these sightings look like fools and look like, or that they were doing it just for the attention because they were creating hoaxes just to be, to be in the newspaper or to be famous or whatnot. And just to totally discredit, who they are and what they saw. And it it when is it the right time? I think what is going to be my question. When is it the right time? I personally have not seen any. Well, actually, I might have. Actually, I told you about that one time that I went to the gorge, right?
Right. Yeah.
The Columbia Gorge. But anyway,
Yeah.
maybe that's a story for another time. But
I mean, and I haven't seen any either. But I look at the evidence. I'm not. I think it's so rare, but there's so many of us. I mean, if you look at and it's not, and that's the other misconception that a lot of skeptics. Oh, it's just the U.S. It's not just the U.S. There are
right.
millions and millions of other examples in other countries throughout the world.
Is
We're
it
just
fair
so
though?
focused on us that we don't look at it outside of
Right.
that.
Would it be fair though that um and maybe because we're just so inundated with so much other stuff that's happening and with social media, kind of like depending on what goes viral is what is bubbled up to people and in front of people and what they pay attention to. But do you think that these sightings have actually subsided, or have they continued and you just have to dig for the information?
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at Project Blue Book, and I don't have it right in front of me, but there was a certain percentage of the cases that they reviewed, and it was a pretty high percentage that they could not explain. Now, even with today's technology, I think there's still enough of the incidents that it probably wouldn't be that far off from. Yeah, you could explain a ton of stuff away, and probably it should be done that way. I think that's the science. That's the scientific method. I'm all for
So
that.
yeah. So Project Blue Book classified about 69% of UFO sightings as known or identified, while 22% were classified as unknown.
And that's a hell of a lot, and I
That's a
think
lot. Yeah.
I don't think that it's that far off even nowadays. Maybe it's a little bit less because, or you can identify more is what I mean. So
Right.
even if it's 10%, and they're getting way more reports of this kind of stuff on a daily basis, if for not just from the public or from private pilots, we're talking about the military who for years and years and years have not been able to report any of this stuff because it was a stigma. If you dared do it, you would be grounded. You would not, your career would be over within the military if you dared
Right.
bring everything like this.
Right.
And so it's if you think about it, the most successful psych op that the US military has ever done in trying to cover up. Not so much that they're trying to cover up, but that they're making people afraid to report it. And
Right.
so, and if they would have been transparent with it from the very beginning, as in a lot of other countries do, Chile, I know you like to go to South America. Those countries take it seriously, and they have programs to actually investigate it,
Right.
and
I
they
think we
have
talked
evidence
about
to
that.
back it up, right? So
Yeah.
to me, it's this weird kind of like we've got to be the first to figure to sort of crack this code, and and it's more for further episodes. We're talking about uh retrieval programs and trying to reverse engineer the technology that they've picked up.
Right.
But if you just look at this particular incident with Kenneth Arnold, that is kind of the thing that kicked off everything. If you believe in UAP UFOs, it kind of started with this guy here bringing it to the press.
Yeah.
The original whistleblower.
And but and with today's technology, obviously it can go both ways. One, there's maybe too much in the sky that could be with today's technology
Drones
that
and
could
all.
be perceived, you know what
Absolutely.
I mean? Could be
Yes.
misperceived or misidentified. But there's also, I believe, there's also just as many people who have access to, high, um, high intensity telescopes and things that kind of scan the skies that they don't have to rely on the government to release anything because they may be able to actually capture it and then release it into the wild,
Yeah.
basically just, set it out as YouTube videos or TikTok or whatever, release it without government. Well, I suppose the government is always watching, right? So even if they release it, maybe they'll like quash it right away. But
They're
uh,
just gonna try to use disinformation as much as they can. Now, it's not everybody within the government. I don't think everybody in the government is evil and trying to do this kind of stuff. I mean, we've seen that in recent years, but and I think people need to get out of the way of just okay, there's this video evidence or there's this photograph. There's also the stories of the people who have been affected by it, and it's not just they see it; they are being affected physically. People have become ill and died
right,
because of interactions with UAPs. And there's a psychic effect to it. There's like these stories that are all over the world in ways that you can't fake and you can't like make up. Some of the stuff. I mean, it's the stuff in movies, but not even the movies got any of this stuff right. Right. And this is like real people who have gone through some real shit. And so I think it's time I agree with you to a certain extent. It's like, do we just do full disclosure and tell everybody that we have that we're not alone? I don't know if that's the right thing to do, right?
well,
It may not be.
it may not be, but the truth is out there. So if you enjoy this content, please give it a like and share it across your socials to help get the word out about our show. And if you hadn't already done so, please subscribe. And on YouTube, click that bell icon to make sure that you don't miss out on any of our future episodes. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.